Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the NBA slate on Draftkings and Yahoo for Thursday, February the 4th. We're going to cover this 5-game Thursday slate, break it down team by team like we always do. Just before we do get started with the breakdown, guys, as always, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button down below. If you are new to the channel, be sure to click that subscribe button as well. Click the notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. You never miss out on any of my new videos. You will also get notified every time I do go live, and I will be live streaming this afternoon for tonight's slate around 4 o'clock Eastern time. So if you're able to tune in to the stream, I can answer all your questions. We can break everything down once again. I will be live streaming, probably around 4 o'clock Eastern time for this 5-game slate. But yeah, just hit the like button, guys. Hit the subscribe button. Check out the Patreon content as well. That's linked down below in the description. If you want to get more content from me, you want to see more that I have to offer, I do have additional stuff on Patreon that you can check out, link down below. But we'll start off with the Jazz and the Hawks. Start off with this game. So on the Jazz side today, normally this is not a team that I really go out of my way to target whenever they're on a slate, just because, whenever they're fully healthy, I think all these guys, they put up similar, in terms of points per minute, like Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, they put up similar points per minute on the year, like fantasy points per minute. It's all about the price tags for me. Their price tags so far this season have kind of been pretty appropriate. They've never been guys I really wanted to go out of my way to play, but this is definitely a different slate. We only have 5 games, and it's a really good matchup against the Hawks. So I think these guys actually stand out as pretty strong options today. Donovan Mitchell I do like quite a bit. He's 7,800 on DK. He is really affordable on Yahoo. If you play over on Yahoo, Donovan Mitchell is only $30 at the shooting guard position. I think he stands out as one of the better shooting guard plays over on Yahoo. And on DraftKings, even at 7,800, I do like him quite a bit at his DK price. I don't think he's going to get a ton of ownership on DK, but he does stand out as, a fine pay-up option at the shooting guard position. We know he's going to get probably 35, 36 minutes if this game's close. Really good matchup here against the Hawks. The Hawks have actually been playing better defense this year, but they're still a pretty fast-paced team. It's still a favorable spot for Mitchell. I do like him quite a bit at 7,800. I like Rudy Gobert as well at 7,500. I think this is a very favorable matchup for Rudy Gobert, one he had a lot of success in earlier this year. In only 28 minutes, he had 41 DK points against the Hawks. I mean, Rudy Gobert, I know he's been bad lately, but this is normally someone we can rely on for consistency, normally giving you a double-double every night. He can always, block 3 or 4 shots, can give you a few assists as well, but usually he's a lock to get a double-double, has the upside for definitely, 40-plus DK points. I think it's 7,500. He also looks very appealing on the slate. On DraftKings, I think I'd rather play Gobert over Mitchell, just given the little bit of savings, plus the center position today. Not a ton of standout options. If we look at center, you obviously have Jokic at the top and Embiid at the top you could go to. Definitely guys worth paying up for. Jokic, tougher matchup against the Lakers, but we know he has a ton of upside. Embiid, we have to watch his status because this is a back-to-back for the Sixers. He could maybe rest today. I don't think he's going to, but that's a possibility. But like in the mid-range, you got Christian Wood, but 8,800 does feel a little expensive for Christian Wood. Clint Capella in a tougher matchup against Gobert. I don't love it, 8,700. Porzingis, it's a back-to-back for the Mavs, so we could maybe have Porzingis out today. Like at center, I think Gobert does stand out as a pretty solid option, so I do like him quite a bit on DK at 7,500. Him and Mitchell are the 2 guys that stand out most to me from Utah today. Bogdanovich is fine. Mike Conley is fine as well, but I really like Gobert. I really like Mitchell. And not much else from the Jazz stands out to me, like Clarkson, Bogdanovich, Mitchell. I think these are guys you can mix in tournaments, but I don't think they're top plays for me. Really just going to keep my exposure to the top 2 guys. So we can go ahead and move on to the Hawks side. Now on the Hawks, back-to-back for this team as well, so we'll have to keep an eye on any injuries here. I don't think anybody would rest, but it is a back-to-back, so that is something worth noting. Trae Young, obviously not a great matchup here against the Jazz, but he remains pretty affordable on DK at 9,300. He didn't have a great game Wednesday night against the Mavs. He played 36 minutes, only had 41 DK points. Normally we're getting 45, 50 DK points a night from Trae Young. He's been really consistent lately. Outside of that game on Wednesday, he had put up 8 straight games of 50-plus DK points. Still affordable. I do have some interest in Trae Young. I don't think he's a top pay-up option for me, but definitely someone, I would get some exposure to. Capella, I think, a little bit too expensive on DraftKings. John Collins, I think, still somewhat reasonably priced. He's fine at 7,300, but obviously in a matchup against the Jazz, not someone I'm really going to be going out of my way to play. I don't think there's really anyone from Atlanta that stands out as a top option. I think Trae Young you can mix in tournaments. I think John Collins you can mix in tournaments. But I don't really like anyone else on the Hawks today. Or on the Hawks, I should say. Not a team I have a ton of interest in. This game overall, I like Mitchell and Gobert on the Jazz side. I have interest in Trae Young and Collins on the Hawks side, but outside of those four, really not much else stands out from this game. So I think we can go ahead and move on to the next one, the Warriors and the Mavs. So on the Warriors side, do have some injuries to talk about here, especially in their front court. So the Warriors right now are down two of their starting centers. Obviously, Wiseman was starting early on in the year. He is out. Kevon Looney, who was starting over Wiseman, is now out as well. I'm not really sure what the Warriors do here. I think the likely scenario is that Eric Pascal moves into the starting lineup and they slide Draymond Green down to center. But they could maybe start. I don't think they even have another center. Yeah, they don't have another center on their roster because Marquise Chris is also out. So, yeah, the likely scenario is that Draymond Green starts at center and probably either Pascal or Toscano Anderson moves into the starting lineup. We'll definitely need to keep an eye on this Warriors starting lineup. Luckily, this is one of the first games of the night, so we should have that before lock. But Curry, I do have some interest in at 9,800. He had a really big game last game. He was pretty low owned on that slate. He had 73 DK points against Boston in 38 minutes. Really productive on a point per minute basis. Obviously, we know Curry has this kind of upside in him on a nightly basis. His price came up a little bit to 9,800. He is someone I always have interest in just because of the upside he has, but this doesn't really feel like a slate where I'm going to be going out of my way to play Steph Curry. I think I'd rather get to some of the other studs that we'll talk about later. I think I'd rather play Luka on the other side of this game. So, Curry, he's viable like he always is, but not someone I'm really going to go out of my way to play. I think the most appealing guy to target from Golden State is Draymond Green. He's 5,200. Pretty affordable price tag for him. I like him quite a bit on both sides. Pretty affordable on Yahoo as well. Looking over there, he's coming in at $19. So like I said, I think Draymond Green probably starts at center here. That should be a little bit of a boost for him, especially for his rebounding numbers. Last game, he played 36 minutes against Boston, which I believe is a season high. I don't think he's played more than 36 minutes all year. So he got 36 minutes last game, which was great to see. He only had 2 points, but was still able to score 31 DK points, even though he only had 2 real-life points. And this is just the kind of player that Draymond Green is. He's going to do a little bit of everything, can give you some points, can obviously get rebounds, assists. He's really good with the defensive stats. Just a guy that contributes in all categories. And if he's going to be starting at center and playing over 30 minutes at only 5,200, I actually like Draymond Green quite a bit. And he's someone I haven't really played much this year, but I do like him a good amount on this slate. I think, with no Wiseman, with no Looney, that should just, open the path for Draymond to play even more minutes. And he's been a guy they've kind of limited a little bit this year, but it was great to see him get 36 minutes last game. And I think if tonight's game is close, we get over 30 minutes again from Draymond. So I do like him a lot at 5,200. The price on Kelly Oubre's come down, so he's a little bit appealing at 5,400. He always has upside, could randomly pop off any game. I think Oubre is someone you can definitely look to in tournaments. I'd probably rather prefer him over Wiggins given the savings. But then we need to talk about Eric Pascal and Toscano Anderson. So I am assuming that with Looney out, one of these two guys moves into the starting lineup. Last game, it was Toscano Anderson who played really well. He got, I believe, 27 minutes off the bench, 25 DK points in that time. He had not even been in the rotation. Last game he had played was on January 23rd, and then last game against Boston, he got 27 minutes kind of out of nowhere. Played really well. He's only 3,500. Eric Pascal did not play well at all. He played 14 minutes, had only 4 DK points. We'll have to wait and see. I think if Pascal starts, he's viable, but Draftkings upped his price to 4,500, so he's still not a top value for me. But if Toscano Anderson winds up starting, he's only 3,500. I think he'd actually be a pretty good value on this slate. I don't know how productive he's going to be in the starting lineup, playing alongside Curry, Wiggins, Oubre, but if he were to start, I feel better about his minutes, and he's only 3,500, so we got to keep an eye on that Warriors starting lineup. I think we could get some value there, maybe with Toscano Anderson if he does wind up starting. But that kind of does it for the Warriors for me. I know Kent Bazemore had a solid game off the bench, but, he only played 17 minutes. He's just not going to get enough minutes. I think really on Golden State, I like Draymond quite a bit. I think whichever one of Pascal or Toscano Anderson starts could be a decent value. Curry, you can target in tournaments, but he's not a top play for me. Really, from the Warriors, I think Draymond's the guy I like most today. So moving on to the Dallas side. Looking at the Mavs here, this is a back-to-back for the Mavs, so we will need to keep an eye on the injury status of Kristaps Porzingis. I believe he's rested on their last 2 back-to-backs, so it's been a while since he's played on a back-to-back. He could definitely be out for this game, so this is something we will need to monitor. Luka coming in at 10,900. I like him quite a bit. even if Porzingis plays and if Porzingis is out, then obviously Luka would get, an even bigger boost. Pretty good matchup. The Warriors are a pretty fast-paced team. I'm pretty sure they're playing at like a top 5 pace this year. Luka's someone I always have interest in. He just always has so much upside. We saw Wednesday night, really good game against the Hawks to no surprise. 64 DK points in 38 minutes. Nearly had a triple-double. Like, this is just the upside that Luka has, and if Porzingis were to sit, I would feel even better about Luka, especially, if Porzingis were to sit, that would give us some value from Dallas, so got to keep an eye on that. Luka's a really good option regardless, but Porzingis, if he does play, I think is viable at 7,700. He did have a pretty solid game Wednesday night against the Hawks, had 44 DK points in 34 minutes. It's a back-to-back, so this will be something to monitor. But if he does play, I like the matchup against the Warriors. I like the price as well. We know the usage on the Mavericks is going to be dominated by these two guys. So both Luka and Porzingis are in play today. The secondary options from Dallas, though, I think I'm only going to be considering these guys if Porzingis winds up resting. So if he does wind up resting, then obviously Tim Hardaway Jr. becomes viable. Josh Richardson would get a bump as well. I would like him quite a bit at only 4,900. He's been playing really well lately. He's been getting big minutes. He maybe could be fine even if Porzingis plays, but I would like him more if Porzingis were to rest. And then we would probably get Willie Cauley-Stein, or maybe, I don't know what they would do with the starting lineup, but probably Willie Cauley-Stein would start at center. He'd be a really good value at 4,100. Maxi Kleber would get a boost as well at 3,600. So just got to keep an eye on the status of Porzingis. If he winds up resting, that's going to open up a lot of options from Dallas. This will definitely be a team I'm looking to target for value, but I think that really covers the Mavs. I think that covers this game. So moving on to the next one, the Trailblazers and the Sixers. So really big injury to watch here is the status of Damian Lillard. He is questionable right now. If Damian Lillard winds up out, that is just going to really just change this slate, just make it just so different, because with Lillard now off the floor, if he were to sit, we would have a scenario where Anthony Simons would most likely start at point guard, Gary Trent would start at shooting guard, and they would just have no other bodies. We've seen scenarios where Damian Lillard's out, and then McCollum he plays, he dominates the usage, and Simons and Trent don't do much. But now if we get a scenario where there's no Lillard and we know McCollum is still out, I would have a lot of interest in Anthony Simons. He would be one of the better value plays on the slate at 4,600. And even Gary Trent, I know he's expensive at 6,200, but if Lillard winds up out, Gary Trent is actually viable, in my opinion, at that price. I think Robert Covington gets a boost. I think, Carmelo would get a boost as well coming off the bench. There's going to be a lot to like from Portland if Lillard winds up sitting, especially in terms of value. But if Lillard does play, if he plays, I think he's viable as a pay-up option himself. I don't love him on the slate. It's not the best matchup against the Sixers, but we know the upside that Lillard has when McCollum is off the floor. He's going to dominate the usage. He's going to play a ton of minutes, assuming he's fully healthy. So he's viable, but I would probably rather play Luka. Probably would rather play Embiid on the other side of this game, assuming Embiid plays. Even the Houston-Memphis game, there's a lot of guys I like there in the mid-range. So don't really love Lillard even if he plays today, but if he's out, that's going to open up a lot from Portland. Enes Kanter, I think, is viable. Tougher matchup against Embiid. Definitely could get into some foul trouble here, but they're going to need his size. They're going to need him out there, attempting to slow down Embiid. And he's only $7K, which is still a pretty reasonable price tag for Kanter, especially now that he's playing, over 30 minutes a night. So, yeah, lots to like from Portland today if Lillard winds up sitting. If Lillard plays, that's going to lower my interest in really a lot of these guys. I don't have too much interest in Portland if Lillard plays outside of maybe Kanter, maybe Lillard himself, but yeah, we just got to wait and see on the status of Lillard because that is, really, really big news. But going ahead and moving on to the Sixers side, another team that's on a back-to-back today, so we'll have to monitor the status, of these guys. I'd assume they all play. The one guy who could be, up in the air is Joel Embiid. If there was somebody that would rest on the back-to-back, I think it would probably be Embiid. I don't know if he's rested on back-to-backs this year. I don't think he has, but something to monitor. He was questionable, I think, or he's been questionable lately. He's been dealing with some sort of injury. I wouldn't be surprised to see him sit, so just, make sure you're monitoring that. But assuming that Embiid does play, I think at 10,200, he looks like a pretty strong pay-up option on this slate. Fantastic matchup against Kanter and, Harry Giles. Just two guys that really have no chance of slowing down Embiid. We saw him just play really well Wednesday night against the Hornets, 34 minutes, 57 DK points. They had no answer for him. I don't think the Blazers are going to have any answer for Embiid either. So at 10,200, I like Embiid quite a bit as a pay-up option today. He'd be up there with Luka in terms of my favorite studs on the slate. But really outside of Embiid, I don't have much interest in anyone else on the Sixers. Obviously, things are going to change if Embiid winds up resting, but for now, I'm just going to assume he plays. So that doesn't make me really have any interest in anyone outside of Embiid himself. I don't really like Simmons or Harris at their price tags. I don't really like any of the other secondary options. So I think that does it for this game. We can go ahead and move on to Houston and Memphis. So this is a very appealing one, one we're definitely going to have to talk about. So right now, at least as of Wednesday night, we already got word that Victor Oladipo, he did play on Wednesday, but his status is, doubtful for Thursday. He's unlikely to play. That's word that we got. So I'm going into this slate assuming that Oladipo does not play, which is going to open up a lot from Houston. We're going to talk about John Wall, Eric Gordon, two guys I like quite a bit. Christian Wood at the top. I don't think this is a slate where I'm going to be paying nearly $9K for Christian Wood. I know he has a ton of upside, but I think there's just other guys I'd rather spend for. He was pretty bad Wednesday, which was kind of surprising. He really struggled, only had 25 DK points in 22 minutes. I mean, I'd expect him to bounce back here and play much better, but the price tag is still pretty high. You need over 50 DK points for him to be like a really good play at that salary. So I think there's other guys I'd rather go to, in that price range over Christian Wood today. But John Wall, I like a lot here. With no Oladipo, with Oladipo unlikely to play, I think John Wall is a great option in the mid-range. $6,900 on DK, very affordable on Yahoo as well, coming in at $30 over there. I like him a lot on both sides. So without Oladipo, we know Wall is going to dominate the usage. He's going to be, the primary ball handler, going to have the ball in his hands a ton. The minutes have just really been the question for John Wall. It hasn't really been the production. He's been really productive this year on a point-per-minute basis. He's just not playing a ton of minutes lately. He's only been getting, 28 to 30 minutes. I know blowouts kind of, hurt him a little bit. Like in the OKC game, that one blew out, so he only played 22 minutes. I'd assume if tonight's game is close against Memphis that we probably get over 30 minutes from John Wall. He got 30 in that competitive game against Portland. I think in close games, we're going to get, around 30, 32 minutes from John Wall. He did rest on Wednesday, so he should be, healed up, ready to go for this game. I like him a lot at $6,900, especially if Oladipo does indeed wind up sitting. I think John Wall is just too cheap in this scenario. He's going to be productive when he's on the floor. He's going to dominate the usage, going to have the ball in his hands a ton. I like him a lot on both sides. I think he's just too cheap today with Oladipo not expected to play. Then Eric Gordon, without Oladipo, I think Eric Gordon benefits as well. $5,800 on DK does feel a little bit too cheap. I like him quite a bit on Yahoo as well, coming in at $19 over there. So we see this happen a lot whenever, John Wall or whenever Oladipo's out, one of these two guys are out. Like Eric Gordon just gets a ton of opportunity, and we saw that Wednesday night against OKC with John Wall out. Eric Gordon played 28 minutes in the starting lineup. He lost some minutes because of the blowout, but he still was pretty productive with 35 DK points in that time. His price did come up a little bit to $5,800, but assuming Oladipo does not play today, Eric Gordon should be starting once again, should probably play over 30 minutes if it's a competitive game, and he does get a nice bump in usage with Oladipo off the floor. So I like Eric Gordon quite a bit as well from Houston. Him and John Wall are definitely the two guys I really want to target from the Rockets today. Jae'Sean Tate, he started, played 31 minutes, only had 11 DK points, but he's going to start and play, pretty good minutes. He's viable, but I think from Houston, for me, it's definitely John Wall. It's definitely Eric Gordon. Those are really the two guys I have the most interest in from the Rockets, and not a ton else stands out from Houston. So I think we can go ahead and move on to the Memphis side. So on Memphis, another team that's been dealing with injuries lately, kind of the same guys remain out that have been out lately. Joe Val, Jaren Jackson, Grayson Allen, all those guys remain out. John Morant at the top here, $7,600. Definitely have interest in John Morant on this slate. I don't want to say he's been bad lately, but the minutes just haven't been there since they returned from their COVID protocols or whatever. They went about 2 weeks, the Grizzlies did, without playing games, and then they came back. Morant played 28 minutes, 22 minutes, and then 29 minutes. He has lost minutes to blowout in their last two games. I'm pretty sure both those were a blowout, and he didn't play his full allotment of minutes. I think if today's game is close, we finally see Morant get over 30 minutes, and I think 32, 33 minutes is probably the likely scenario. They've kind of been easing him in. They've kind of been easing in a lot of the other starters, but they've played 3 games now since coming back from COVID protocols. I think they're pretty fully ramped up now. At $7,600, the price tag is still it's still reasonable, I think, for Morant. Obviously, it hasn't gone down. With how poorly he's been playing, you would think he'd be like $6,500, but I still like Morant quite a bit. I think with his price, still where it is, not a ton of people are going to be playing him at this price. It's a good matchup against Houston. Should be a pretty fast-paced game. I think Morant goes overlooked on this slate, and I think he is a pretty strong tournament option because at some point, he's going to have a big game. I mean, he's not going to continue to be as bad as he's been, so I like him a good amount on both sides. He is pretty affordable on Yahoo as well. His price tag has come down a little bit over there, down to $32. So I do like Morant quite a bit on both sides. But other guys from Memphis like Brandon Clark, Dylan Brooks, Kyle Anderson, I don't think any of these guys stand out as like top plays today. I think they're just guys you can kind of mix in. Xavier Tillman, obviously he's been starting in place of Joval. Been getting pretty solid minutes, 24, 26 minutes. I think most nights, if the game's close and Tillman's, not in foul trouble or anything, he's probably playing like 26, 28 minutes. At his price, though, he's not like a top play for me. Really, I don't like a ton from Memphis outside of Morant at the top. Like D'Anthony Melton, I liked a good amount last game. He got 22 minutes off the bench, 26 DK points. His price was a little bit cheaper then. I don't know if his minutes are going to be as high as they have been lately now that they're starting to give the starters more minutes. So D'Anthony Melton's really tough to trust at 5K. Like, not much stands out from Memphis today outside of, Ja Morant, who I like a good amount. Clark, Brooks, Anderson, if I was going to target anyone else on Memphis, it would probably be those three guys, but none of them are top plays for me. I think if I had to choose one, it would probably be Kyle Anderson just because he's been really productive on a point per minute basis this year. He was pretty bad last game, but, Anderson has been productive when he's on the floor, and his price came down a little bit. So, yeah, I think that really does it for Memphis. We can go ahead and move on to the late night game of the Nuggets and the Lakers. So this should be a pretty fun game to watch. I don't know, in terms of DFS, I don't know if this is going to be a game I have a ton of interest in for DFS, but starting off with Jokic at the top, Jokic, it's a tough matchup. It's not a great spot against the Lakers. Lakers are one of the best defensive teams in the league, but Jokic is just such a high-usage player. He's just so dominant. This offense runs through him. I don't really care who he's going up against. I think Jokic is always someone we can look to pay up for. On this slate specifically, though, I think I'd probably take the savings and roster Joel Embiid. Probably would rather roster Luka Doncic, especially if Porzingis winds up resting. But, Jokic, if you're playing a good amount of lineups, if you're playing a handful of lineups, I would have Jokic in my player pool for sure. Jamal Murray, I think, is viable as well. His price has come down. He's been a headache to roster this year. He's been so inconsistent, but at 6,800, he could pop off for over 40 DK points basically any night, and I wouldn't be surprised. So he's another guy that's kind of, viable for tournaments. We do need to talk about the status of Gary Harris, though, so he is still out for this game. Will Barton is still pretty cheap at 5,200. Monte Morris is still somewhat cheap at 4,200. I think both those two guys are viable with Gary Harris out. We did have this scenario on, I believe it was Tuesday or Monday, I can't remember. These teams were supposed to play. Will Barton was really popular that slate, and then the game got postponed, so we never got to see it happen. But assuming this game's good to go, Will Barton I do like as a value with Gary Harris out. I think the minutes will be there. He did play 37 minutes in their last game. That was a game where Gary Harris got hurt in. 37 minutes, 35 DK points. The minutes should be way more secure. They should be higher with Gary Harris off the floor. So I do like Will Barton as a value at 5,200. I think he does stand out. It's one of the better, cheap options at the small forward position. I think he is pretty cheap on Yahoo as well. Still $16. Think that's definitely a reasonable price for Will Barton. And Monte Morris, I would assume he starts in place of Gary Harris. He was in the starting lineup last game. Obviously, that game got postponed, but he was still expected to start. Should probably play close to 30 minutes in the starting lineup. Pretty cheap at 4,200. You could definitely target Monte Morris as a value. I think there's probably going to be better value open up, especially if, Porzingis winds up resting, or maybe even if Embiid winds up resting. But Monte Morris is viable. But outside of, Jokic, Will Barton, Monte Morris, and maybe some Jamal Murray, I think that really does it for the Nuggets for me. I don't see much else that I really like from Denver. Maybe Michael Porter Jr., you could target, but like Michael Porter Jr. has just been so frustrating to roster lately. He's a guy that's, tough to trust right now. I think I'd probably just stick to the three guys, Jokic, Will Barton, Monte Morris. Those three guys I like most from Denver. But moving on to the Lakers side, the Lakers for me, it's LeBron, it's AD, and it's really nobody else. I don't like any of these secondary guys from the Lakers. Right now, LeBron and Davis are both probable, so they are expected to play. Neither one looks like top options for me, though. I still prefer a lot of these other studs we've already talked about over the Lakers guys. You could always, target LeBron or AD. They always, could pop off any night, but doesn't really feel like a slate where I'm going to be targeting them, going out of my way to play them. And honestly, the Lakers just are not that appealing of a team, in my opinion. This game is not that appealing. I think it's going to be somewhat slow pace. It's probably going to be low scoring. Two pretty good defensive teams. I think the most interest from this game is just, on the Nuggets side with, Barton, Harris, or not Harris, but Barton and Morris, and obviously Jokic you could target in tournaments. But, Yeah, that really does for this game. I don't love a ton in the late night game. So I think that does it for all 5 games, guys. We broke everything down team by team. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I do appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed, just hit that like button before you do get out of here. Hit the subscribe button as well. Click that notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. You will also get notified every time I do go live, and I will be live streaming this afternoon for tonight's slate, probably around 4 o'clock Eastern time. So if you are able to tune into the stream, I can answer all your questions there. We can talk about everything. So check out the stream this afternoon. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Check out my Patreon content. Link down below in the description. And yeah, I think that pretty much does it, guys. Good luck tonight. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you in the next one. Good luck, guys. Peace.